It is with much pride, admiration, and thanks that I ask Congresswoman Bachmann to deliver our keynote address. Ms. Bachmann, please.
It is my honor. Thank you very much.
By the way, I want to make a statement. Anything which I have said about Mrs. Bachmann was based on what I read and then heard about. Tonight it was reconfirmed that she's all that what everybody thinks about.
Thank you. Thank you.
You want to step?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. Eugene, I want to thank you so much for that absolutely beautiful introduction that you gave. I thank you, your beautiful wife, Jeannie, your family, and for all of you here tonight who are standing in support of Bet El, for coming tonight and for standing for the state of Israel and for those who need the help from Bet El, because truly Israel is God's idea. All we are doing is trying to follow his leading. My husband Marcus is here with me this evening, and also our youngest daughter Sophia. She is a college student here in mid-Manhattan, and we have been thrilled to be in this beautiful city, drinking in the beautiful sights, drinking in the beautiful sounds, and drinking in the festivities of the season. And what we were told before we came to New York is that we needed to, in the midst of all of our drinking, to make sure that it wasn't more than 16 ounces when we're in New York City. So we'll try to pay special careful to that. But I truly am honored and privileged to be here with you, to speak with you all this evening, especially given the events of this last month. We have witnessed history once again. And as Israel truly is the navel of our planet Earth, we look to Israel to see the course of human events. And in this last month, as I said, we have watched and again and observed history. And let me also begin by saying Bet El, where Jewish history began and for whom this special dinner is for, must and always will remain a part of Israel. And do not forget the Bet El Yeshiva, a remarkable center of learning for all its inhabitants. And I must say I was profoundly moved by the young man who came to us and graced us with his words of thanks tonight for what all of you have done for him and for the students at the yeshiva. We must continue on this wonderful yeshiva in generational perpetuity in the heart of this biblical land. Throughout history, the Jewish people have inspired our world with the Jewish faith, with Jewish values, with Jewish culture, with Jewish courage, with Jewish compassion, and with Jewish tenacity. What the Jewish people have achieved through history, what they have contributed to our world, what they have overcome in spite of their very small numbers, in spite of millennia of brutal oppression, is awe-inspiring to the world. It touches my inner soul to think that the modern state of Israel is the literal fulfillment in our lifetime of Ezekiel's prophecy of the valley of dry bones, bones which thousands of years later miraculously came back to life. And think of it, 4,000 years, the very same promised land, 4,000 years, the very same language, 4,000 years, the very same chosen people, all regathered from every nation, tongue, and tribe, again to be fashioned into Israel, the modern miracle that we've witnessed today. And the American civilization from which we are all blessed rests upon a foundation of laws your Jewish ancestors shared with the world. and that they continue to share with the world today. It's the light of the Torah, you see. The Bible has been the lamppost guiding man throughout the ages, and the Jewish people were privileged to be the keeper of the light of the Torah. In Congress, where I vote, in the Capitol, is a very famous podium. I'm sure you have all seen it when you've watched television, when you see the President of the United States standing to deliver his State of the Union address. It is at that podium, do you know, that the entire circle of the room is encircled with profiles of the various lawgivers throughout all of the ages of the 5,000 years of recorded human history. You can come into that chamber and look about and see the various lawgivers, but only one of the lawgivers whose faces encircle the House of Representatives, only one is given the honor of having his full face in a sculpture. And not only is there only one face where it is the full face in a sculpture, that face is placed across from that important podium. And the Speaker of the House always looks directly into that face. The President of the United States, when he speaks to the nation, always speaks directly into that face. That face is the face of Moses. Because you see our founders recognized, even in the important artwork in the House of Representatives, that the Speaker, the President, must look into the face of the first lawgiver, and that would be the lawgiver who received the law, the 10 Commandments, from God through Moses. You see, our nation in America recognizes that our law is established upon the law given to us through Moses, the 10 Commandments in America. And our law in America, as the famous jurist Blackstone said, who taught the American founders, Blackstone said in his words that American law is based upon English law, the foundation of which is again the 10 Commandments as given to God by Moses. We can be proud of this American foundation. You see, growing up for me, God's promises to the ancient Israelites, as Eugene said, were very near to my heart, which is why I took the first opportunity that I could to go to Israel when I was a young woman. You see, the day after I graduated from high school, I flew on El Airlines to Tel Aviv, and I went to work, as Eugene told you, for the summer at Kibbutz Be'eri in Beersheba. I landed in Ben Gurion Airport in 1974, and that airport, as many of you may remember, bore no resemblance to the beautiful airport that we land in today when we land at that first-class airport. I walked off the airplane, outside, onto the tarmac. Tables were set up outside. People who were wearing non-Western looking clothing were talking very loudly. I know that shocks you. There were chickens that were flying around when I got off the airplane. Many of you may remember that. It was the first summer of my life when I went to a restaurant and ice cubes were nowhere to be found. Israel was only 26 years old. They had come a long, long way. But for this 18-year-old, no ice cubes was a clear deprivation for me that summer. And aside from the beauty of the desert where I was privileged to live and the deep cultural and spiritual appreciation that I had for the Jewish people, the experience gave me a very clear realization. Israel is under constant external threat. And during my time, we worked on the kibbutz. We got up and we started our day at 4 o'clock in the morning and we worked till noon. And my work was to pick weeds in the cotton fields at the kibbutz. You see, this was a great motivational area of work for someone about to go to college, to make sure that I studied hard and didn't end up picking weeds in a cotton field for the rest of my life. Send your children there. This is a very good motivation. At all times in the cotton fields, we were accompanied by soldiers carrying machine guns. From the very quiet community in Minnesota where I came from, I had never before seen soldiers carrying machine guns, let alone in a field, let alone where we were working. And of course, we all hoped that the soldiers had not been out too late the night before, as they looked for landmines in the fields where we were busy working. They were making sure that we were safe, and we were so grateful for them. I just graduated from high school. I was a very naive Midwestern girl. I had very little understanding of the complex geopolitical threat that Israel faced on every side of its border. Today, it's 38 years later. Israel faces even greater threats. And if there is one thing to all of us in this room that's abundantly clear from this last month, it is that Israel is in need of America's friendship and commitment now more than ever. It was here in this beautiful city of New York earlier this week that the United Nations dealt a tragic blow to Israel's security by elevating the Palestinians one step closer to statehood. And think of this, the UN rewarded Hamas, a designated terrorist organization that had just finished shooting 1,300 rockets in an unprovoked manner into Israel, and they were rewarded with the first step to statehood. It's unthinkable. It was brazen, but that's the UN. Does anyone doubt the outcome in the UN if they were voting on statehood for Israel this week? The sad reality is that Israel's enemies are committed to the absolute destruction of the Jewish state and the Jewish people. They do not recognize Israel's existence. They are not interested in peace. Consider the words from Hamas Charter. Quote, Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam obliterates it, just as it obliterated others before it. Those aren't just words on a page. That is an evil promise by people who are intent in achieving their goal. True to their word, the terrorists of Gaza have fired nearly 14,000 rockets into Israel since 2001. That's an average of 3 attacks per day into the very area where I once worked and lived. Now imagine for a moment if even just one terrorist rocket hit the United States. There's absolutely no question. We would defend ourselves, as we should. And Israel, too, has the unmitigated right and duty as a sovereign nation to protect and defend her innocent people. And although a ceasefire is currently underway, make no mistake what these days are. It is an empty truce. It is a chimera, if you please. It is buying time for the terrorists to simply regroup and reload with Iranian weaponry for the next round of attacks against Israel. This we know. As history has shown, there are no concessions Israel can make that will satisfy their enemies. Wake up, smell the coffee. Leaving Gaza 7 years ago, which I fervently opposed, we were taking our second oldest son to college. I was with my husband in our hotel room. I was weeping on my bed as I saw Israel leaving and surrendering Gaza, because I knew what would happen. I knew the events of this last month would come about, because I knew what the promises that were being made by those who had entered Gaza. That was supposed to do the trick, you see. Israel sacrificed land, as they were told to do. The promise of peace was at hand. But the PLO failed to give Israel the peace that they had deserved. And despite this reality, the international community, and I must say, with all due respect, it is true, our current administration continues to demand that Israel gives even more and calls on them to concede even more. This is nothing more than foolishness, and in my opinion, suicidal for the state of Israel. But we must recognize there is simply no moral equivalency between a sovereign country like Israel that follows the rule of law and a terrorist organization who uses women and children as human shields and openly celebrates in the streets when a bus filled with innocent Israeli civilians is bombed in the streets of Tel Aviv. You see, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran are the very epitome of evil, and political correctness must never impede our moral courage to call it for what it is. The mischaracterization of the Arab Spring is better described as an Islamic earthquake or a Sharia ascendancy. Benign autocratic regimes have been replaced today with radical Islamists who support Sharia law. Consider just a few examples in the very tough neighborhood in which Israel tries to survive. In Tunisia, where the so-called Arab Spring or Sharia ascendancy began, rioters stormed the U.S. Embassy. They tore down our flag. They replaced it with the black flag of al-Qaeda, which flies today. Just last week, the Islamist Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan called Israel a, quote, terrorist state. And he said that they will continue to ride the trolley of democracy until they reach their goal, and then they will get off. All we have to do is listen to what they say. Jordan is under a new pressure from elements of the Muslim Brotherhood who seek to bring down the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. Lebanon has fallen under the terrorist influence of Hezbollah, and now they become the Lebanese government. In Syria, the Assad regime continues to slaughter innocent men and women and children, but unfortunately the opposition in Syria is like picking one's poison. You either pick a butcher or you pick al-Qaeda, Muslim Brotherhood. Egypt is now fully controlled by the violent Muslim Brotherhood, a radical Islamist organization with a stated history of threatening the certain destruction of the United States and Israel, and has even called on Jerusalem as their capital rather than Cairo. Iran, truly, without a shadow of a doubt, Israel's greatest threat, is working feverishly to obtain a nuclear weapon, unabated. Unfortunately, the Obama administration has and continues to give Iran the unmitigated luxury of time to continue their illicit mission. I give you this very direct and very sober report tonight because the United States and Israel quite literally are running out of time. This is a moment for clarity, and in standing with Israel and against Iran, because Iran has been perfectly clear. Although sanctions may have somewhat impacted the Iranian economy, unfortunately, they have done absolutely nothing to slow down even Iran's nuclear ambitions. You see, we must realize Iran is on the field. They're suited up, and they're playing for keeps. And unfortunately, the Obama administration doesn't even recognize that the game has started. You see, it's pretty easy to figure out who will win the game if there's only one team on the field. The president of Iran has repeated unequivocally his intention to wipe Israel off the map. If the last 100 years of world history has taught us anything, it is this: when a mad man speaks, listen. The world must listen. 11 minutes after Israel declared her sovereignty, then President Harry Truman did the wisest thing and the bravest thing he could have possibly done on behalf of our nation. He wisely recognized the sovereign state of Israel's existence. You see, we were the economic and military superpower of the world. We were the big dog, and we had Israel's back, and the world knew it and made no mistake. And every president since Harry Truman has unequivocally submitted and affirmed that support for Israel, as we well should. 4 years ago, beginning with his speech in Cairo, June 9th, 2009, the president sent numerous signals that the United States commitment for Israel is anything but certain. 18 months ago, President Obama demanded that Israel recede to her indefensible 1967 borders. We were shocked. And he said this is where Israel should begin her Palestinian negotiations. In my opinion, that is not negotiable. And with their wildly inappropriate vote on Thursday, the UN affirmed that demand from President Obama on Thursday. Now Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem will all be labeled as occupied territory. And Palestinian terrorists, who most recently launched those 1,300 rockets into Israel, will now be called freedom fighters. This is shameful and senseless. Here is what we should do today to stand with Israel. Every other country on earth has the sovereign right to designate their capital, except Israel. I call on President Obama in a show of true solidarity with Israel to declare Jerusalem the undivided, eternal capital city of Israel. And when he makes that announcement, we already have the final brick in place of the building that will be the United States Embassy, so there's no question. The building will be built, the boxes will be in, the personnel will be inside, and then we'll make the announcement that we're in business. After Thursday's vote, the United Nations motto might as well be, the only anti-Israel pro-terrorists need apply. Our only option at the UN now is to vote with our feet and with our wallets. Exit this house of mirrors. Stop sending this organization, United States, money that we borrow from China. The PLO's unilateral actions must have consequences. But sadly, if you read the papers this morning, President Obama said he will not initiate consequences for the PLO, only that he may not veto congressional actions. Well, my, what a profile and courage that is. That's a profile certainly not in having Israel's back, with all due respect. Therefore, the PLO should now lose all United States aid because of their misguided UN initiatives. I also believe the United States must demand that this week's UN vote will not now, nor will it ever lead to elevating the status of the PLO in any other international body or agency of the United Nations. President Obama should also recognize Israel's 1980 annexation of the Golan Heights and any settlements which Israel as a sovereign state chooses to annex. Simply put, Israel must be accorded the respect to which any sovereign democratic nation is entitled. And as a believer in God's promise to Abraham and Isaac in Genesis, I strongly believe that God truly blesses those and those nations who bless Israel. Our united longing for the rebuilding of Israel was realized in a miraculous way, May 14th, 1948, when Israel was reborn in a day. The rebirth of Israel is a part of America's national heritage, too. Our immediate and ongoing support of Israel is part of the reason, I believe with a certainty, that America has been so singularly blessed as a nation. And I truly believe that our destinies are intertwined. In the nearly 40 years since I once lived and worked in the state of Israel, The world has undergone dramatic changes. Tyrants have fallen. New global powers have emerged. Globalization and the interconnectedness of nations have risen at an exponential rate. Yet the one constant that has continued unabated is the external risk that Israel has faced each and every day of her existence. Israel has never been in greater peril and never been in greater need of American support, because today Israel's very survival is at stake. Now is the time for urgency. Now is the time to demonstrate to the world America's united commitment to Israel's survival. So America must, without any equivocation, without any qualification, always be Israel's most reliable defender in the world. And I encourage each one of us, as God did to your forefathers, to Caleb and to Joshua. He said it, be strong, be courageous. And again he said, be strong and courageous. And further in the chapter, be strong and courageous. Speak out. This is God's land for you. You are God's chosen people, and we can and we must trust him. God bless you all. God bless the biblical homeland of the Jewish people. Be not ashamed. The Jewish state is Israel. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.